Hey, life groups. I hope you're doing well and having a good evening or time together so far. Happy spring to all of you. And especially if you've been tracking with these messages and conversations as a church and really this Lent season of focusing on the cross and anticipating Easter together. I hope it's been rich and meaningful for you. And this week, when it comes to understanding the significance of the cross and everything it reveals about God and can tell us about our own lives, I was reflecting on the idea of peacemaking. I'd shared a little bit about, many of us would know the Christmas song by John Lennon, Happy Xmas, where there's the line, "War is over if we want it." I was reflecting on that dream that could war and more conflicts be over in our lives if we really wanted it? And what might Jesus and his cross teach us and show us about how to live into that kind of dream? I'd also reflected on just some of the story we see in Scripture and some of the just violence we also see at the center of the story of Scripture, and had shared about an Old Testament description from Leviticus of God's instruction about sort of payback and revenge, where the instruction was about, having to have an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But then I really centered some of the reflections on Jesus' teaching, which I think ultimately point to the cross, out of part of the Sermon on the Mount, where it says this, where Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven." And this is where we see Jesus more fully revealing God's heart for our lives and for our world. Especially when he says that if we live like this, we actually reflect God's image. We are like children of God the Father. And that this would be a way to sort of take violence out of circulation if we could live more like this in all of our circumstances and relationships. And ultimately, I think this points to the cross, to what Jesus did on the cross, where Jesus fully laid down his right to retaliate and showed that God would rather lay down his life for his enemies than to kill them. And then Jesus is now inviting us to follow him in that way. And so I invite you to process this together. I think there's a lot of nuance to these conversations, probably a lot of disclaimers. I get that some of these questions may feel open-ended. I confess I don't have all the answers. And yet, I invite us to be people, kind of the two applications I shared, that would grow in praying for peace globally, that we would actually cultivate hearts that want peace, that want to see war be over, not delighting in evil or vengeance, but praying for peace globally, and that we would grow in practicing peace personally. And perhaps even tonight or in your conversation, whenever you're having it, you can maybe share a little bit about or reflect on any relationships that feel at odds right now or in conflict. And what would it look like in the way of Jesus to practice peace through apology and forgiveness, through prayer, through laying down your own right to get even, and asking Jesus to help you be a peacemaker like him in the way that he laid his life down for us on the cross. And so that's kind of the heartbeat of this week's conversation. You can follow the Conversation Starters Guide, some of the scriptures there or questions there. And I hope you have a rich discussion. And my prayer with you and for you is that we would all become peacemakers to a greater degree in the world. So have a great discussion and have a great week.